questions. So I always like to start with kind of my background. So I've been doing this, May is my 39th year. So I've been doing this for quite some time. And I can tell you over the past, I would say 10 years, I have never seen a product within retail explode the way I have self-checkout. It was kind of exploding pretty good before COVID hit. Once COVID hit and people couldn't get employees to work in their stores, we really seen it take off. And now after COVID kind of is going away, we're still seeing a huge upward trend because of labor and things like that. We'll kind of cover some of that. So I think you guys and gals are coming at this at the right time. I get to talk to retailers like yourself coast to coast. That's all I do all day long. With the Toshiba perspective, I travel around the US and Canada a little bit and talk to retailers about how can they improve their customer experience in their stores with self-service. So if you're one of those retailers that thought once upon a time, you know, self-service is not for me, we're all about customer service, it just tells me you need to get an update on what self-service really is about. So the key message here is self-service does not have to mean no service, right? And that's the key thing here. And you got to keep that in mind as I go through this. So it's not like what it was a few years ago. So hopefully you can see my agenda. Let me get over here. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about why Toshiba. I don't want to assume everybody on this call is an existing Toshiba customer. So I'm going to spend 2 seconds talking about who we are, where we came from. If you're currently buying Toshiba hardware and software from us, thank you. We definitely appreciate your business. Those that are not, I'll give you kind of a quick update there. Talk about what's going on in the industry, i.e. what's driving self-checkout in the world today, what's changing. Next thing is, how do you remove friction from the front end, right? Nobody likes to wait in line. We'll obviously do that with self-checkout. We'll talk about that. But you can't talk about self-service without talking about the shopping experience. Those two go hand in hand. And you can't talk about self-service without talking about loss prevention, right? Retailers are always worried about, well, what about shrink? Are people going to steal from me? Well, if I told you today that if you implement self-service and you do it right, your shrink will go down versus stay the same, you probably won't believe me, but hopefully I'll convince you of that as we go forward. We'll wrap it all together with the back office system server. What does it mean? What does it do? Talk about managed services. Okay, you're excited. Now what do you do next? And then we'll kind of summarize it. So with that, I like to talk with my hands. So I'm going to go off video. I'll come back on video here when we're close to the end. So let's talk about who we are. So Toshiba. Those of you that remember us from the past, we're a part of IBM's retail group. So we spent since the 70s within IBM. And around 2012, Toshiba was looking to expand their reach within retail. IBM was looking to divest out of technology at the store level. So Toshiba purchased our entire retail group from IBM back in 2012. So we're located in Durham, North Carolina, right outside of where I live. Over 2,000 employees came through into Toshiba, including myself. So our service support, our intellectual property, our whole product line came over. And with that, we still continue to dominate in the retail space. Right now, we have pretty much business at 60 out of the top 25 retailers today, 60% of those. So you recognize a lot of those today. Most of them are using our hardware and software. As you can see, you're kind of in good company. It's an exact same hardware that STCR is talking to you guys about today. Let's keep going. So again, continuing to dominate in retail. This chart just kind of shows why we're number one, you know, whether it's number of patents, things like that. But since I'm a grocery guy, I always focus on the bottom. Right now, we're in 9 out of the top 10 US grocers today. So when you go into the Kroger's and the Albertsons Safeways of the world, you're going to see our hardware installed in a lot of those retailers today. So we continue to dominate there. But the only reason why we can be successful is the technology, right? When we build our self-checkout systems, it's just like the way we build our point of sale systems. So again, we build it for longevity. So we're very selective on the components that go into these systems, right? We want to make sure they're part of Intel's embedded roadmap. We put them through the paces, and we want them to last at least 7 years in your environment and serviceable after that as well. So again, we really build them to withstand the retail industry. And those of you that are using our equipment today know exactly what I'm talking about. And by doing that, we really take them through retail hardening. So we take them into our labs here in Durham, North Carolina, and we put them through the paces. So whether it's dust, lint, you know, smoke, liquids, chemicals, it doesn't matter. We do it to the machine to see what it's going to take to get it to fail. And because of that, we've had great success in having our systems last for, for a very long time. And self-checkout is no different. We try to use common parts in the self-checkout as we do in the point of sale. So if you hadn't had the opportunity yet, you can go to this link here when you get the presentation and go look at YouTube at some of these videos. And this is just one that we've done to show how we test for liquid damage inside of a machine. So being that they're customer-facing devices, if a shopper comes by and accidentally spills liquid on the machine, you know it's going to keep on working. So let's watch this quick video.
We are always trying to up our game here at Green Market Grocery, which is why we couldn't wait to roll out our latest and greatest concept, curbside checkout. And that's why we decided to stick with curbside pickup. Toshiba knows in retail, not every idea holds water.
That's why they test their systems rigorously to make sure a small splash doesn't turn into a tidal wave of problems. Because if your Toshiba systems can work here, they can work just about anywhere.
So that kind of gives you the idea of kind of what we do to the equipment. So here's my last product slide. So again, whether it's all-in-one point-of-sale systems on the top left, peripherals on the top right, distributed systems on the bottom left, and then self-service on the far right. That's kind of what our product lineup is. So from soup to nuts, not just self-service, but kind of the whole gambit in between. So let's talk about what's causing change in the industry here. So we know from years past, right, that raising, labor rates, right, continue to rise in the marketplace. That's usually why a retailer will do self-service. They can't afford the labor rates. I'm envisioning the majority of you are probably in the Northeast, and you've probably already seen some of these rates. We haven't seen them yet in North Carolina, but labor rates continue to rise. Right, here's an interesting one. Resignation. People are leaving their current jobs today to go find employment elsewhere because they can make more money, right? We see that over and over again. So if you really look at why self-service continues to grow, there's a number of reasons, right? So we know millennials would prefer to use self-checkout versus interacting with cashiers. We see that all the time. Most shoppers prefer to use self-service to avoid waiting in lines in your stores, right? And out of the 65% that are in the line, if you had self-checkout, they would move over to self-checkout, right? We talked about labor rates, but now the number one reason, and I'm sure you'll probably agree with me on this, is you can't find labor, right? Retailers, grocers cannot find labor to work in their stores. So because of that, drastic things are happening, right? So this is a local chain here in the Carolinas. They're having to cut their hours short, store operating hours short, because they just don't have the labor to work, right? We see it in restaurants here as well. And then you got the Targets of the world, the Walmarts of the world, the Amazons of the world. They're paying what Target's doing, $24 an hour, right? So how do you compete with that? This is something that I pulled out a couple of days ago, right? The Lambert report basically said that labor shortage is the top concern for most grocery CEOs, right? And it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So when you couple that with this latest study that said that 94% of grocers are either implemented self-checkout, are in the process of doing it, or taking a serious look at it. So that leaves about 6% of the grocers out there today that are still thinking, well, it's not for me. So I don't know if you're in the 6% or if you're in maybe the 27%. Different groupings on this chart, but whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, I think self-service is here to stay. So the real question is, how do you embrace it, right? These are just some larger chains that you probably recognize. These are all chains that are rolling out Toshiba self-checkouts or have already rolled them out recently within the last couple of years. Albertsons, Safeway, they're in full swing getting them out. Costco is now re-rolling out self-service that they discontinued years ago. Wegmans, again, embracing our System 7 self-checkout. Southeast Grocers, Walmart in Canada and the UK, and some pilots here in the US with us. CVS has been rolling them out for a couple of years now. Ahold Delhaize, same thing in the East Coast. Ingles in the Carolinas, and then Kroger. They're converting all their U-scans to Toshiba self-checkouts little by little. So these are just some larger chains, but if you kind of really peel it back, these are independent grocers. So these are people like yourself. You may have one store, you may have 20 stores, you may have 5 stores, it doesn't matter, but these are all smaller chains like yourself that listened probably this exact same presentation maybe a year or two ago, and they're now in full swing to implement self-service. Several of these STCRs already engaged in, and they can really talk to you about some of the success story. So before I dive in a little bit more, I want to take a step back and explain how we ended up here, right? Self-checkout's been available for quite some time, 20 years, right? But I like to pick on Albertsons. So before Albertsons purchased Safeway, right? Back in 2011, Albertsons made an announcement to the world, right? All the trade rags said, Albertsons is removing self-service from all of their stores to really provide a better customer experience. So that was back in 2011. If you fast forward to 2019, Albertsons purchased Safeway, and they teamed with Toshiba, and they made another announcement. We are empowering our consumers and providing self-service. So here's a company, right, that in 2011 ripped out millions of dollars of self-checkouts to turn around in 2019 to put new ones back in. And you got to ask yourself, what changed, right? What changed in what they did in 2011 versus today? A lot has changed. And a lot of it is more the psychology of self-checkout and what's the right way to do it versus the wrong way. And I think what we've learned over the past 10 to 15 years has really come into play. And now they're in full swing implementing them across the chain. But it goes further than that. So a lot of these chains that have implemented self-service, years ago, they're in full transformation mode. What I mean by that is those that installed 4 lanes on the front end are now doing 6 or 8 lanes. Some of them are doing full store transformations. They're piloting stores with 80% of the front end being self-service. I'm not saying you should do that, but what I'm trying to tell you is the train has left the station. Those that have embraced it are embracing it even more because they're seeing the payoff, and the customers are embracing it as well. You're always going to have that percentage of customers that refuse to use it. It's just like saying with loss prevention, you can't prevent everybody from stealing from you. There's always going to be a percentage that are going to, regardless of what measures you put in place. Well, self-service is no different. No matter what great of a job you do of doing self-service, there's always going to be a percentage that just refuse to use it for whatever reason that is. So let's look at this one. This is an interesting one. So back to Harris Teeter again. They took a store in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they implemented all self-checkouts on the front end. So again, they removed all standard POS lanes, but they didn't cut any jobs. And you got to ask yourself, well, why in the world would a retailer spend all this money on self-service and not cut any jobs? It really doesn't make any sense there. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but it goes outside of grocery, right? If you look at Five Below, they're not in grocery, they're implementing self-service. So I don't care what industry you're in, whether you're in hospitality, home improvement, dollar stores, every single industry there is trying to figure out how they can implement self-service within their 4 walls. Some of them do a much better job than others. Some of them are a terrible experience. Like when I go into a Dunkin' Donuts, they want you to use their self-service screen, and it is the worst user experience I've ever seen in my life. And I prefer not to use it. So it all depends on how it's implemented within that retailer itself. So you as a retailer, you're thinking, COVID hit. I had POS in my store. Then when COVID hit, I had to figure out how to do online ordering, curbside pickup. What's the deal with this whole scan and go mobile app, and then there's self-checkout. They're all the right solution. The real question for you as a retailer is, what can you do to improve the in-store experience? Because at the end of the day, can you do online ordering? Yeah. Does online ordering give a good experience to the shopper? Not as good as you can give them in the store. So you really want to capture that in the store. So how do you capture in the store is you remove the friction in your store for that shopper, and you give them choices, right? If you look at this last study done by Payments, basically, 8 out of 10 shoppers would prefer to shop in your store, right, into a physical store. And you and I both know they're going to spend more when they go to do that. So how do you capture that in the store versus in other ways or means, or them sitting in the parking lot for you to do curbside, right? So, last chart on this piece is this, right? the world is evolving. The question is your technology in your store evolving at the same time based on what the needs of the consumer are? These are all businesses that are no longer or on the way out in business because they did not change with the times, and technology took it over, right? And you look at the screen and you recognize a lot of these things. So the real thing is, you know, you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can technology-wise to kind of stay up with what's going on from an industry perspective. So how do you remove friction and frustration from the front end, right? So let's think about it. By implementing self-service, you can still provide an exceptional customer experience and operational efficiency at the same time. And how do you do that? Well, give your shoppers choice and control, right? Allow them to pick the method they choose to check out of your store. If they come into your store, they can use self-service or they can use full service, right? Go to a regular POS line. It's really their option, right? Give them a more private experience. So there's some shoppers that come in, maybe they want to buy personal hygiene items. They don't want to go through a traditional lane. But more importantly is when you get slammed on the front end, you may not have adequate help on the front end. So how do you smooth out that spike on the front end without having to pull people from their other positions in the store, taken away from operations, right? So those self-checkouts will absorb that spike on the front end. And I think that's the number one thing I hear from retailers when they implement self-services. They say, you know, hey, Paul, this is outstanding because now when we get busy, those self-checkouts kind of take over and I don't have to call somebody from the, you know, from another department to come bail out the front end. So really, you can reduce your queue times without increasing your front end labor cost. But here's where the rubber meets the road, and here's what I want you to start thinking about, back to that Harris Teeter comment about no jobs being eliminated. Are you going to save labor when you do self-service? Absolutely. But what happens if you were to take that labor, right? The labor that the customer feels you're doing away with, if you can take that labor, assuming you have it, right? And redeploy that to other areas of the store to drive a better sales, better customer experience. And that's kind of the end game, right? So we know that by redeploying labor in the store, you're going to get better results because, you know, 50% of the shoppers that come in don't know everything they need when they enter the store. 93% cannot find an associate in the aisle to help them, and they're not going to walk to your front end to go find somebody, right? 85% of their shoppers would buy more if they got the help, and 90% would return to your store if they had a good experience and they got the help from a knowledgeable associate, right? Think about, take your mind off grocery for a minute. Think about traditional retail. What sets apart a general department store, let's say like a JCPenney's or a Kohl's, and you're working in the you know, the clothing department versus a Nordstrom's or somebody like that, right? Bloomingdale's. You know, you go to those higher end stores, you got people helping you at point of selection, not just standing behind a cash register. Same thing with grocery. So if you can redeploy that labor, right, what you're going to find is this: 90% will leave your store without buying anything if they can't find what they're looking for. But by redeploying the labor, 80% of the retailers said that they've reported an increase in sales 20 to 50% per transaction when that shopper got help in the aisle. So again, you're going to drive up revenue and improve customer sat. So here's the value chain, right? Start at the bottom. Reduce labor checkout costs, right? By redeploying that labor to other areas of the store. So you're going to provide a better shopping experience. You're going to improve store operations. So by giving your shopper, right, when they walk into your store, choice, convenience, control, privacy, they're going to get the help from the labor that you redeployed. It's going to build more loyalty in your store, increase wallet share, which increases your revenue and your customer sat. So that's kind of what we're trying to get to. So picture yourself as a shopper coming into your store. Here's your format. You got maybe 5 lanes, 4 lanes, 8 lanes, doesn't really matter. But without self-service, you have one-to-one queuing. And what I mean by that is you have a point of sale lane, you have a cashier, you have a shopper with other shoppers queued behind them. There's one way in, one way out. The only way you can start to bust down that line is to open up another POS line, right? The joy of self-service is it's one to many, right? So now you have, let's say, 4 self-checkout lanes in a courtyard environment. You got one line going in. So the shopper that's waiting in line, the line is moving quicker than on the left where it's one-to-one queuing. So the shopper feels they're getting in and out quicker because they're going through the line quicker because you have more ways to get out of the store. So I don't care whether your store has 3 lanes or 5 lanes today, there's always a way to fit more self-checkouts into that store, given the right diagram, and we can kind of help you get there. So here's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to do the kind of big bang approach, right? We always recommend you start off on the left-hand side of the chart. Maybe you're curious, you're concerned, is it going to work for me? I'll say this, we know self-service works in a grocery store. Now, whether it will work for you or not, it all depends on how you implement it and whether you want to follow best practices. So we always recommend you start small with 1 or 2 stores as a pilot, depending on how large your chain is. And if you're having success, you're getting the results you want, your customers are embracing it, your employees are embracing it, then you start to move to the right and you start to do full store transformation. And that could just be 4 lanes, it could be 6 lanes, who knows what it is. Every retailer starts on this chart. I don't care what size you are. I like to pick on Wegmans. They're always well known for their customer service, customer experience. They have beautiful stores, as you probably know. But it's interesting, when they started down this path with us many years ago, there were like several retailers saying, you know what, self-service is not for us. Our customers are different, da, 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 da. We heard the story 100 times. We said, okay, how about if you do this in the prepared food areas and see what kind of results you get? And they did it, and it worked very successfully. Now, if you fast forward to today, there's a Wegmans that opened up about 2 miles from my house here in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and they have, I think it's 12 self-checkout lanes and 14 POS lanes. Now, I know you're probably saying, well, that's a big front end. They can do that. Well, I get it, but my point here is they went from, we're all about customer service, now they're in full store transformation, is because they figured out how to provide that good customer service with self-service, right? And they did it right, and they're able to embrace it. Now they're fully on the right-hand side of the chart, trying to do more and more self-service because they've learned how to do it the correct way. And that's just a great success story. So let's dive into self-service. So we're going to talk about our System 7. And I'm going to show you this quick little video. Let me get a drink of water, and then we'll keep going. All right, they give you a good idea of what System 7 is all about. So here's where we're at. System 7 is our 4th generation of self-checkout. And what we did with this version of self-checkout, we went to our business partners, we went to our clients and said, okay, what do you like about prior generations? What do we need to change and tweak? We brought in human factors experts, and here's what we developed. On the bottom right-hand side, you see different versions of our self-service. We're going to dig deep into each one of those as we go through the next couple of charts. But again, like I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, these are built just like our point of sale. They go through the exact same testing requirements that we put our point of sale through. And what we try to do is incorporate as many point of sale components as possible, again, for ease of serviceability and obviously for the retail hardening. So the touch screen, the printer, the system, PC that's inside of it, right? It's the same technology that you have running in a traditional lane today, right? So we kind of keep common parts. It's very modular in design. So what I mean by that is once you get it installed, and let's say you selected the wrong type of a bagging module on it, and you wanted to go with something larger to handle larger orders, you can do a field upgrade. You don't have to do a complete rip and replace, right? Also, the self-checkout comes with the necessary self-service software included in it and all the necessary tools. So it's kind of a complete solution when you look at the whole solution. These are the different versions of it. So on the left-hand side, we'll start there with our tabletop or countertop. We call it a Pro X hybrid kiosk. So this is good for maybe the perimeter area of the store, the customer service counter, where you're only looking to do cards only, credit cards only, or debit cards, no cash. And this is where it swivels between shopper facing and cashier facing, right? And when there's an intervention, you can spin it around, declare that intervention. So good case for either maybe a prepared food area, a coffee bar, or maybe the customer service counter. When you're not busy, you can turn into a self-service device. Next one, going from the left-hand side, is our freestanding kiosk. Again, can be used for similar reasons if you need something that's more floor standing. And then on the right-hand side is our cashless or card-only machine, and then our full tendering self-checkout over on the right. So that's kind of where we're going to spend most of our time. Here's kind of a lineup of the majority of the different models that we have. There's several more that aren't on here, but mainly the differences are the type of bagging stations that they offer. So the only difference between the ones on the top and the ones on the bottom are the ones on the top accept cash tendering, and the ones on the bottom are card only. Other from that, it's the exact same system. We label them with small, medium, large, extra large, as you can see. That's just based on the bagging module. So again, what are you trying to solve for in your stores? Are you trying to attract larger orders, smaller orders, medium-sized orders? I always like to say for an independent grocer, the large cash model in the top center is one of the largest, is one of the most popular ones that we sell. I guess I should say that, because it gives you enough real estate to handle a small order, a larger order. You can handle plastic bags, paper bags, reusable bags. Things aren't falling on the floor like it would be on a medium or a small, and it doesn't take up that much more footprint than a medium model, for example. That's usually the sweet spot. Those retailers that go with a small or a medium usually call us back 6 months later saying, hey, you know what, we want to upgrade to a large or an extra large, for example, because they realize people are embracing it, they want to use it, and they need more space to go do that. Let's talk about the software, right? Can't talk about hardware without talking about software. So the software that runs on the self-checkout lane, we call it CHECK, right? Checkout Environment for Consumer Service. That's what it stands for. And the way it works is it runs inside the self-checkout lane, and it talks to the point of sale application. So whether you're running Lock SMS or Toshiba Ace, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, the self-checkout lane will look just like a point of sale lane on the back end. So when you're doing your end of day, when you're doing your reporting, it looks just like a point of sale. And the reason for it is the self-checkout doesn't have its own set of pricing. It doesn't have its own set of items, descriptions, and all that. It pulls all of that from your point of sale in the back office. And the way it works is this. Running inside that self-checkout lane is going to be the point of sale app. So it's either going to be Ace or Lock SMS, and the point of sale app is what's controlling all of your transaction flow, all of the point of sale business logic, all of your promotions and loyalty, all of the pricing. It's handling all that good stuff, right? It's handling the printing, all the credit card processing. And then it talks to the check application. The check application is what's controlling the user interface. So it's controlling the screens, the produce pictures, all of the audios, all of the lane security, all of the cash management. So they kind of work in hand. So we have thousands of self-checkout lanes running in this environment already. So the integration is already done. It's already working. It's already proven. So you don't have to worry about any of that. And then STCR will come in and implement it. So you'll have obviously no issues there. The way the check software works, what's its main goal, right? Its main goal is to let you shop at the self-checkout lane without getting stopped, right? Nobody likes to get stopped. And we call that an intervention in self-service terms. But our software is smart enough to look at the lane, look at what's going on at the lane with any errors that may have occurred or any help that may be needed. And we try to queue it up for at the very end of the transaction. We don't want to stop the shopper in the middle of the transaction like some self-checkout systems do. So let's say you come there and you scan an age-restricted item. We're going to queue that up. We're going to stack it until later in case something else happens. And then the shopper assistant would come over at one time when you hit tender to clear any errors. But we're hoping that you're going to clear the error yourself as you go through the transaction, depending on what that error is. So let's peel the onion back a little bit. Let me explain to you the way security works. And then you'll realize why I told you your shrink will probably go down when you implement self-service. We have patented algorithms that run in the background, right? And what we do is we know the weight of every product in that store, right? As you're learning, as the system is learning the first couple of months, it's learning the weight of all your products based on the UPC. And after it gets a good scan of 10 of the same product, it's going to lock it into the weight database. And it's going to know, okay, when they come in and bring that product, if it weighs outside of that range, there's a problem. It's going to be an intervention. But it's also smart enough to know that manufacturers, sometimes they add 10%. Nowadays, they remove 10%, and they keep the same UPC. So you can have multiple weight ranges for the same product, and it will learn that as time goes on. But the neat thing about what we do is we overlay the shopper's behavior with what they're doing. So let's say the shopper walks up, they scan a couple items, they put their umbrella in the bagging area. The first thing the lane is going to do is say, please remove unscanned item. Maybe they didn't hear that, they missed it, they keep going. If they remove that umbrella before they hit the tender button, the lane will never stop because now the shopper has addressed their own error, they fixed it, right? So that's goodness. They can kind of clear their own error without having a shopper assistant to come over there and help them. And then you can work with STCR to change the level of security at the lane if you needed to. So there's default settings, but you can make it as stringent as you want it or as loose as you want it, right? Some of the other things we do, and there's a whole list of them, but a couple other ones is if the name of the product is on file, we'll say it. So for example, when you go there and you type in 4011, it'll say place your bananas on the scale. Then when you weigh them, it'll say place your bananas in the bagging area, right? So it says bananas a couple times, right? PLU, you can limit how many times they use the same PLU. So maybe you don't want them to use that same PLU more than one time. So those are just a few of the different things that we do to help drive down any type of security risks that are at the lane. And this is also what happens that doesn't happen at a POS lane, right? There's no weight security at a POS lane like there is a self-checkout lane. Somebody walks up with a type 2 barcode, that's always a concern. Well, what happens if they put something else in the bagging area, right? Because it already knows the price inside the barcode. Well, we go one step further. If you import the scale file or have it talk to the point of sale in the back room as far as type 2 barcodes, it can find out what the cost is per pound for that item and match it to what's on the scanner scale and what's in the barcode. So we kind of do another check and balance on type 2 barcodes. Bulk items, these are things that you don't want them putting in the bagging area for hurting the bagging area or hurting themselves, right? So you would go one time and flag what items are considered bulk. So maybe things like bags of dog food, cases of water, or maybe things that are optionable items. What I mean by that is it doesn't matter whether you put them in the bagging area or not, it won't flag an error. So these are things like floral or greeting cards. You have the choice to either scan them and put them in the bagging area or don't. We always recommend going with some type of a hand scanner, whether it's quartered or not is really your choice. We support multiple ones, but the whole point here is I pull up with my cart, I got big stuff on the bottom, I can take that hand scanner, I could scan those items as a pass around item and leave them in my cart, but all security is still turned on, so you don't have to worry about that as well. The check software really has 3 modes of operation. There's full security mode like we've talked about. Then there's shopper speed mode and cashier speed mode. So shopper speed mode basically does this. It turns off security We don't recommend that. That's what Walmart does. We highly discourage that because your shrink will go up. But the point here is, why do we have that? Well, let's say you have a lane that's got a technical issue and you want to keep it open. You can under the covers turn it off. So it's not looking for the weight of the products. It can still operate, and then it can get fixed, obviously, at a later time. So you can kind of keep the lane open. And then there's cashier speed mode. This is where really maybe the day before Thanksgiving, you're getting slammed. You want to turn a couple of your self-checkouts into a point of sale lane. You can turn it into cashier speed mode, allow a cashier to stand there and scan orders, bag orders, and then let the shopper pay. In that case, you definitely want to make sure you're going with a cash model self-checkout so you can accept any kind of a tender, right? So those are really 3 different modes of operation. So when I walk up to the lane, right, we want to give a good shopper experience, right? So all the LED lights are on the lane, lighting up, making it very inviting. When it's time to start the transaction, the LED light around the display will come on. When it's time to process a coupon, the LEDs are on the coupon slot. And then when it's time to pay, the LED lights around the cash tendering and the pin pad will come on. So we're kind of guiding the shopper through with LEDs. The screens themselves, we really flatten them out, made them very easy and simple to read. So this is where you have a configurable area to put your branding on there. You have a scrollable receipt. You have your weight information at the bottom, message bar at the top, telling the shopper what to do next, the picture showing them what to do, and then a button area where you can add buttons to look up products, use your own bag, and then you have the toolbar at the bottom where they can change the language, the volume, or request help. So when you go to enter in a PLU item, this is where they're going to get a keypad. They can either type in the PLU off the item. They can scan the item if you have that turned on, let's say a produce item. You can look it up by image or by name. You'll get a flip chart up there. And on the quick item lookup, you can categorize this however you want to, but this is where you'll spend a little extra time making it so they can simply find the product, whether it's organic, non-organic, whether it's bulk items like maybe ice or firewood that's out front type thing. This is where you kind of configure some of those non-scannable items, right? With the situation on plastic bags, we give you alternative options. So on the left-hand side, you can purchase the reusable bag rack, where it's a mounting on the actual bagging area for reusable bags, or on the right-hand side, you can turn on the paper bag feature where you can prompt for a number of bags and charge for them if you want to. It's really your choice. So we kind of handle those different options. From a loss prevention perspective, we have some additional features there. You can put a little camera mounted on top of the screen, and it's a separate extension to the check software at additional cost, but you can actually show the shopper's face on the screen as they're shopping. Right, for loss prevention reasons, we call it a personal video monitor. You can go the more inexpensive route and just mount a small 10 or 7-inch LCD screen on the transaction awareness light, like you see in the middle, that has a built-in camera. You can show the shopper there. Another option is a different type of transaction awareness light that looks more like a flagpole. And on that flagpole, you can mount a top-down camera, or even the traditional on the right-hand side transaction awareness light, another top-down camera, and you could send that to a loss prevention system where you're getting a top-down view. We do have a loss prevention solution coming out early next year that will also include loss prevention features built into the software for our self-checkout that handles that top-down camera. We're not going to spend too much time on that today, but that is still to come. It's in proof of concept now. So other things we're doing with security is I'm going to show you a little produce recognition solution that we have coming out next month. We're looking at doing some type of bottom of the basket identification, age verification, item identification. So there's a lot of things our innovation labs are doing to help the experience at the self-checkout lane and to continue to reduce shrink as much as we can. So I'm going to show you a quick little produce recognition demo right here. So what you're looking at before I start the video is on the left-hand side is a picture of the self-checkout screen that the shopper would interface with. On the right-hand side on the top is the actual picture of the SCO lane, and you probably can't see it, but on the bottom left-hand side of the screen is where we mount our produce recognition camera that's pointing down at the scanner scale that you can see on the bottom right-hand side. So every time a shopper goes and puts a piece of produce on the scanner scale, instead of typing in a PLU number, they can opt to have the lane recognize their produce themselves. So let me show this video.
Today we're going to show you the Toshiba produce recognition solution. For the demo, we're running a System 7 unit that's running our check software, along with a Toshiba Edge camera that's actually doing the computer vision algorithms on the camera itself. Let's get started. In order to enter produce using self-checkout, again, you indicate that you're entering produce. You put your item on the scale. The system recognizes the item. For items that have both organic and non-organic items, both are shown for the shopper to choose. Here, we'll select our bananas, add them to the cart. The solution also works with bags. So here we have an avocado put in a bag. Select produce recognition. The item gets recognized. We add it to our cart. We also recognize items that are in a reusable bag. So here we have oranges, put them on the scale, request the system to identify them, and it does identify the items. So the other feature of the solution is allowing the shopper to correct their own mistakes that they could have inadvertently made while shopping. So here, we'll put garlic on the scale, allow the system to identify it. Let's assume the shopper says they don't want to use that item, they want to key the PLU in themselves. They inadvertently enter the wrong item number. So what the system will do will show them exactly what the camera observes, the item they entered, and what the system selects as the actual item on the scale. Here, the shopper can easily correct their mistake and enter the correct item. Next, loss prevention in terms of customers that are not making accidental mistakes. In this example, they're trying to purchase a steak for a banana. They put the steak on the scale. Enter the produce. The system does not recognize the item, so the shopper can key in their own item number. So here we're keying in bananas. The system shows what was actually on the scale, the item that the shopper entered, so they know that they've been caught. They can continue down this path and say they want to select the bananas anyway. Once they put the item in the bag, the shopper assistant is called over to be able to address the situation. Once they scan their shopper assistant card, we show the item image of the steak. We show that the shopper entered the banana, so the shopper assistant can void the item at this point in time to continue the transaction. That's Toshiba's produce recognition solution.
All right, that kind of gives you an idea of what we're doing from Produce Rec, and we'll continue down that path with a number of other loss prevention features. So there's about 16 different things we do in the check software to minimize intervention. So I'm not going to cover all these 16. You're going to get a copy of these charts, but we covered a couple of them so far. Things like early bag removal, basically what that allows a shopper to do if that's turned on is if once they have bags full in the bagging area, they can remove some bags, put them in the cart, and kind of start on some other bags as well. So we kind of let you do that. We talked about skip bagging, not on files. You're able to handle not on files at the self-checkout itself. There's a procedure for that as well. So let's dive into the experience, right? So where the rubber meets the road with self-checkout is a shopper assistant. So that shopper assistant is somebody that you have to assign to stay with self-checkout the whole time. They're there to provide supervision at the lanes, help direct traffic to the lanes. Each one's going to have their own unique card. So they're going to scan that card when they have to do something, and you can audit that, right? And you can look at the reports to see what that shopper assistant did. But their objective here is to monitor the lanes, look at the transaction awareness light, look at the customer's body language, listen to those voice prompts coming out of the lane to see if they scanned bananas too many times. But the most important thing they can do as a shopper assistant is greet every shopper that walks into that area. Just a simple, hi, my name is Paul. Please let me know if you need any assistance. By making eye contact with the shopper, looking at them eye to eye, speaking to them, the chances of them stealing from you are slim to none. If your vision of self-service is to put a podium there and to put a shopper assistant behind the podium clearing interventions, we don't recommend that at all. We call it the vacation station. That is totally the wrong way to do it. If you want to do a podium, put it off to the side, put a regular POS lane there, and use that to handle exceptions where you can move the order to the POS lane to kind of clear it, right? What we want is a shopper assistant to go to the lane, talk to the shopper, educate the shopper on what may have went wrong that caused the intervention so they know for next time, clear the intervention right there at the screen, at the lane itself, and then let the shopper tender and move on their way. So again, it's a teaching experience. It's the way you build customer service. In the event you do want to clear interventions remotely, you can do that with the mobile operation manager. So this is running on a handheld device, and it's as if you were standing in front of the lane at the same time. So by doing this, you can clear an intervention right here at the lane without physically walking to the lane. Why would we offer this? Well, some retailers don't want to put a hand scanner on the lane, which we think is a mistake. But if you choose to go that route, you can use the mobile operation manager to scan a bulk item to add it to the basket. Or let's say it's early morning, late at night, you're really short-handed. The only thing you have open is self-checkout lanes. So you can use this handheld device to help clear interventions remotely if you don't have the ability to staff those lanes. So that kind of gives you some choices there as well. So that's kind of the mobile operation manager. The transaction awareness light is the light pole that sticks up. So whether it's a traditional one or a flag style pole, again, these lights have a meaning. So depending on what color they are, will determine from a distance, from the manager looking at it from the distance or a shopper assistant, whether that person paid as they're walking away from the lane, the light is green. If they see them not bagging something, they want to make sure that the lights are flashing different colors. That way they know that they had scanned a pass around item. If not, they need to walk over there and kind of see what's going on. So what really creates a good shopping experience, right? You got tools, operational things, hardware, software. Did you guide the shopper through the transaction? Did you remove the complexity? Did you minimize the interventions? And when something did happen, how quick did they get help, right? So the customer is going to grade you on, was it easy and comfortable? How often did it get stopped? And was that shopper assistant there to help me right away? And that's kind of what you're trying to get to, is really improve that experience. There's a lot of questions on cash versus card. Let me simplify it for you, right? About 19 to 20% of transactions are still cash. When you do self-service, the objective behind self-service is express. People want to get in and get out. Most of them are coming in with small orders, right? $20 to $25. They want to pay cash, get in, get out. They might want cash back. So by not offering them cash at self-checkout, you're taking away that choice for them, and you're forcing them to use a traditional lane, right? And they don't want to go wait in line. And since self-checkout replaces express lanes, you do want to change those express lanes to regular lanes, right? So again, you don't want to turn shoppers away. Trying to mix the two makes it very difficult for the shopper. If you understand queue management, it makes it hard if you go to mix cash and cashless. The only time I've seen it work is if you do a bank of 4 self-checkouts that are cash and a bank that are cashless, right? 2 separate areas of the store of the front end for self-service, right? But you got to look at it at a per store basis, and you got to look at the revenue amount of cash versus card versus the transaction quantity, right? That's extremely important, but we can talk about that when you're ready. As far as location goes, we always recommend putting them in the center of the front end where your traditional lanes are versus on the end. There's some logic behind that from queue management. You want about, a couple feet between the lanes, and if you're putting them face to face like we recommend in a courtyard, you want at least 8, preferably 10 to 12 feet between them, so you have enough room for carts to get through. And we'll work with you on that. But again, keep it away from exit doors for loss prevention reasons. And there's also environmentals that you got to think about, but we'll definitely help you with the layout. So given a diagram of your front end, we can help design it for you. We'll show you what it looks like, what the spacing would be compared to your existing lanes. And we'll give you back kind of a grid like this, showing you what it would look like in your store, regardless of the size of the front end. Here's an example I like to use in McKeever's, a great implementation. Their front end was a little larger. They were able to do 6 lanes in a courtyard in the center, right in front of customer service, away from exit doors. Perfect environment. What's missing from here is merchandise racks forming one line going in, because you only want one line going in for queue monitoring purposes. So that's the only thing missing from here. This is an STCR store in Manhattan, a great example of our previous generation. But the point here is they were able to slam 11 self-checkouts into a tiny front end. They broke every rule we had when it came to spacing. But in this store, based on the size of the carts and based on the order size, it made sense. And I've been into the store, and it's just phenomenal about how customers get in and get out quickly, and just solve the retailer's problem with lines going down the aisle because they didn't have enough POS lanes to manage the flow in that store itself. Loss prevention, we spent a lot more time in best practice training talking about loss prevention. But in a nutshell, right, we all know that employees steal as much as the shoplifters do. So when you start to remove employees from the equation, you're going to see your shrink go down because there's fewer employees touching product, fewer employees touching cash. Now you have an automated ATM in the self-checkout lane, counting the cash, dispersing the cash. It's all recycling. So you don't got to worry about opening up the machine every day to give it cash. You do it one time and then you just monitor it from there. It'll tell you when it needs more. And then the self-checkout lanes are all weight security control, right? So you started removing cashiers from the equation, you really start to see your shrink go down in your stores, not increasing because of self-service. Most customers are going to be honest. You got to give them the benefit of the doubt and then put procedures in place to help them stay honest, right? So again, we see loss prevention as a non-issue for self-service if you do best practices. The back office system server. So again, this is a unit that either sits in your store or at your main office. And this back office talks to your self-checkout lane. So it's keeping track of what's going on. It's where the weight database resides. It's where your quick item lookup pictures reside in the audio prompts. This is where you set up a new shopper assistant to access the lanes. It's where the software comes from. You have the choice of either, depending on your chain size, you can either do a one back office server per store, or you can do one at the enterprise talking to each of the stores. And again, this is what manages your self-checkouts. It can be done remotely or on premise. If you lose a connection to the BOSS, it's not a big deal. The lanes will still operate. So you really have choices on how the BOSS is implemented. The thing I like about the BOSS really is the reporting. So you get reporting about how your lanes are doing, what's going on with them, if there's any errors, what the shopper assistant is doing, whether they need cash or not, whether there's not on files that were scanned. So you get a whole list of different reports that'll help you manage those self-checkouts. As far as implementation day, right, this is where STCR comes in, and they're going to help you with the self-checkout configuration, deployment, the software configuration, the placement in the store. There's optionable training. So we hold your hand, right? We'll hold your hand as long as you want us to help you get implemented. We know that in a lot of cases where you're not experienced with self-service except as a user. So we're really there to help you get through that transition from start to end, right? We don't leave you by yourself, and we help you get through it. And like I said, we've been doing it for a long time. We pretty much know what we're doing when we go to help you do that. So in summary, once you decide to move forward with a pilot, right, I'm going to suggest we schedule a best practice session where, I'll come in, or STCR will come in. We'll spend about an hour and a half with your key lines of business, right? And again, I say key lines of business. So depending on how large your chain is, obviously we want executive ownership there, right? Management there. We want, if you got loss prevention people, if you got, any store management that's going to be getting the lanes, you want them there. You want your operations team there, your training people there. And we're going to cover the agenda on the left, right? Getting you prepared for self-checkout. That way, when the lanes get installed, that store is ready to go. The employees know how to answer customer concerns, right? If they ask silly questions like, are you doing away with jobs, right? Things like that. You want to be able to address those things. So we fully prepared a store to get ready for the go live date once you're ready, right? We talk about store planning, loss prevention, all those different things. If you ever come to North Carolina, I can take you for a tour of our manufacturing facility. We build them right here outside of Raleigh at our headquarter location, down the street from our headquarter location. Just a great facility we have there to do self-checkout assembly. Homeland Storage is a great success story we have there in Oklahoma. Basically, they're getting 40% of their transactions going through the self-checkouts. Just great success. I hear this all day long. Retailers that do it right have at least 35% of their transactions going through there. Homeland has 40 plus. So just some great success there. And there's so many success stories that we've had with some of our grocers. And some of them don't have success because they don't want to follow best practices, but that's really their prerogative, right? So with that, Ben, I know I went pretty quick. I wanted to leave time for Q&A, so I will open it up to you and any questions that came in through the chat.
Perfect, Paul. Thank you so much for covering all that great content. It was a lot to digest, but again, we will be sending out these slides to the attendees. You can review again on your own time. The one question we have here that I think we can have time for is, would you recommend an eBOSS, Paul, for 3 stores, 2 self-checkouts in each, or the traditional BOSS in each store?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question. It's funny. Before, we used to say on eBOSS, you want at least 30 stores. Then we ratcheted it down to 5. And I have some that are 3 stores or less. So it's the same solution, right? The BOSS, whether it's in store or at headquarters, an enterprise BOSS, it's the same software pretty much. The only difference here is you're controlling it at a central location versus individual location. So there's pros and cons. what I see is when a retailer has a problem with the EBOS, it's not because of the EBOS, it's usually because the retailer made a change in the networking to that individual store. And for some reason, it closed one of the networking ports that the EBOS was using to communicate to the self-checkouts in that store. So I always like to say it's got to be a retailer that's kind of network savvy, so they can understand the implications of them doing something like that. But other from that, the EBOS really gives you a holistic view of your entire chain, right? So you can look at reports across all stores versus individual stores. You could opt to have one weight security database for all stores versus each store, and also your quick item lookup could be done across all stores versus one stores. So there's some good advantages to EBOS, but at the same time, it takes a little more technical skill to be successful with EBOS at an enterprise level versus a individual store level. But yes, it could be done. There's no limit on how small or how large a chain is to do an EBOS. Hopefully that answers the question.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Well, the other questions that came through, I kind of handled during the presentation. So
Good. Okay.
Awesome job again. I think you nailed all the main points, answering questions for them before they even had a chance to type them out. So I appreciate your time here, Paul.
All right.
If there are no other questions, we will go ahead and get wrapped up here. Final reminder that we are doing another session next Thursday on the 25th at 10 a.m. If there are other members of your team that would like to, have the same presentation, ask any questions they might have, I would love to have them at that session as well. But thank you to all of our attendees, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoons. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, Paul.
Bye-bye.